season 2 of our Information Technology Department podcast. My name is Art Brown, and I'm happy to have everyone here today. I'm excited to announce that we have rebranded our podcast for season 2. As opposed to office hours, we are now naming our podcast Cash In on IT. And we are happy to share and explore the latest trends and innovations in information technology, success stories in our department with our students, faculty, and staff. I'm pleased to share with you our current guest, Jared Bernard. Jared is one of our information technology faculty at MCC, one of our cybersecurity professionals. And Jared, welcome today.
Hey, thank you very much.
Yep, glad to have you here. So Jared, when we have our guests here, I try to pose a series of questions, and hopefully I want to make this a back and forth dialogue, so not just me questioning you.
Sure.
So feel free to jump in and kind of reverse the roles as we go through this. So
sure.
Gotcha. Okay, so to get us started, I do have a couple standard questions I want to ask you. So can you share with me and the audience what inspired you to get into not only this teaching space, but if you can share a little background about your professional experiences before you moved into the educational realm.
All right. Yeah, professionally I was a systems analyst. What I pretty much focused on was transitioning accounting systems and helping to design and build accounting systems. Okay. So I've worked with a few different companies over my, last 20 years. Of a professional career, working with accounting systems. And anyway, in my last job, I worked for JCPenney. So I oversaw all the cash handling systems that did that. And so we were implementing a new one. It was a 2-year project that I helped implement and lead. And it's all the cash that was counted at the stores that were deposited in the bank. And so I helped build and test and design that system before I started teaching.
Gotcha. And then maybe a little bit more your journey from those professional roles to what got you to MCC. Did you have another stop before you got to MCC?
Yeah. So while I was working professionally, I adjunct. I lived in Utah, in Salt Lake, and so I taught at Salt Lake Community College there as an adjunct, and I really enjoyed that, and I wanted to shift over to that. Quite frankly, I was feeling burned out in the industry. That last project that I talked about was pretty intense, and I really had a passion for Linux is really what kind of got me into things. And anyway, I noticed that there were a lot of people when I was teaching at the community college who weren't aware of what Linux was or what it did and how influential it was to business and industry. And so when I taught it at the community college, this was like this brand new thing that students were learning, and it was just kind of seeing that spark in students and learning new things and being excited about this new technology and how it can help them in the future. And so that's what kind of got me into teaching. So I went back to get my master's degree because I knew that would help me teach full time. So I went to the University of Utah and for my degree while I was also working, and got a master's in information systems. And from there, once I graduated with my master's, I started applying just across the country. I was offered a position there in Salt Lake, but I'm not originally from there. I'm originally from California. And, it's time to move on, I felt like. So I got a job at Iowa Western across the river there in Iowa. So I live in Iowa, and I taught there 3 years. And a lot of people from my department there at Iowa Western were retiring at the time. And so there was kind of this shift in dynamics there, and I saw there was an opening at Metro, and my neighbor across the street actually had worked at Metro for a long time and just praised it and really enjoyed it there. And so I applied and got a job teaching Cisco and cybersecurity and Linux. So
sounds good. Thank you. So kind of my next question is a leading question. So can you share with me and the audience some insights into the curriculum that you teach, not only in the cybersecurity space, but you also mentioned Cisco, anything that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, so I focus kind of in 3 areas. I do teach a lot of cybersecurity classes. So within cybersecurity, I teach attacks and intrusions. I guess that's a class that I lead. So that is the offensive side of security, so what people consider hacking side of it, so that students understand what hackers are doing so that they can then stop it, right? And defend against it. And so that's a really fun class because it's always attacking and hacking and things like that, learning how to do that. I also teach an IoT class, which is, I think, a lot of fun, which incorporates a lot of aspects of IT and not just cyber, you know, because there's, you're tinkering things, you're actually building stuff with your hands. You're building mostly smart light bulbs and little controllers and things like that. And you're also integrating some Linux and some networking aspect to it, and a lot of troubleshooting aspect to it as well. I also teach Linux, which is a big part of the program as well. So I teach or lead 3 of the Linux classes that are there.
Gotcha.
And for those who are planning on going to system administration, there's the more advanced ones, but we also have an introductory course for that. And I also teach Cisco.
Gotcha.
So I teach a lot of networking courses. And we have kind of 2 sections of Cisco. The preliminary stuff is our CCNA, or Cisco Certified Network Administrator courses, which are introductory to networking type of things. And then I also teach the upper level professional Cisco classes as well, if you're wanting to take that path.
Gotcha. And so just share with me, I know you and I actually just recently spoken, but of those 3 pathways, cyber, Cisco networking, and the Linux, do you have like a favorite set of classes in that sequence that you like? Or
you know what, it's hard to choose which is your favorite baby, right? You know, I mean, I got into it with Linux. Linux is kind of my big passion. I have a passion on open source and the philosophy behind Linux and how it's become so prevalent in industry. And networking, I fell in love with Cisco. I only first taught Cisco when I started at Metro, you know, 6 years ago or so. And I've really come to a passion of that. And cybersecurity, I see, is just kind of a mashup of both of those. Right? A lot of cybersecurity happens on a network.
True.
And happens on servers. You know, and so I guess my focus is kind of all in those areas. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it's a good meshing and combining of things.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay. So another question with regards to cyber. So what are some common misconceptions that you, when you're dealing with your students in class, you try to address so that, you know, I suspect students come in with, you know, they see the TV shows, the movies, I want to be this ethical, or maybe some cases hopefully unethical hacker. How do you address some of those concerns?
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception is that it's easy and that it's it's part of a formula, right? So that hacking and cybersecurity is just, if you just follow these steps, then you're good. And it's not that way. It's constantly and dynamically changing, and it's troubleshooting.
Right.
Because the bad guys out there are constantly changing what they are doing. And so you have to quickly adapt and shift to that, and you have to learn quickly. So you have to go like, oh, they're now doing this, I've never seen this before. I now need to learn what this is and how now can I protect an organization or do something against that.
Gotcha.
So it's not at all. And even if you're doing offensive attacking, that I try and get across in that, like, you know, if a hacker's trying to you know, take over a website or something like that, there's not just one way of doing it. You know, it depends. There's what is the website built on, what technology is it programmed in, what security methods are already been built in there. What is this, a target attack, or are you trying to just get the easiest targets that are out there, or you're trying to, you know, and it's really tough to protect yourself against a targeted attack.
Right.
Like if people just want to take you down because they don't like you, for whatever reason it is, it's just a basis of money and resources and knowledge. And who has more money and knowledge and resources, right? And it's just a battle of that.
Right.
So the best thing to do is just to cover yourself on the basics, right? Make sure you're not the low-hanging fruit.
Right.
You know, and that's why it's the boring stuff. Good passwords, update on things, because you don't know how much that will just protect you.
Right. Just things people
Because
take for granted.
Things people take for granted. Yeah, and don't use the same password on all your websites and things like that, because that's the thing they will take advantage of really easily if they're just kind of looking for easy grab. I kind of compare it to the lion on the Serengeti, when he's hunting the deer or whatever, the gazelle.
Yep.
It goes for the weakest and the slowest, right?
Right.
So as long as you're not that slowest one behind,
Yep. Probably won't. Yep.
you're pretty good.
Yep. Gotcha.
So
And that I was looking ahead, kind of leads into my next question. You kind of answered it, but my question was, in your experience, what are the most pressing cybersecurity threats facing an individual or organization? So the simple things, right? The passwords, the two-factor, I'm assuming, is part of that equation.
Two-factor helps a lot.
Right.
Encrypting, having a good type of encryption method for storing your passwords and your data are really important.
Gotcha.
And having a good plan.
Yep.
Too. We covered this a lot in our security classes on having a good plan if an emergency or something does happen, right? That takes care of your business, but also your customers, right? And because you're entrusted with, usually most organizations are entrusted with customer data and information, and you need to you're a stewardship of that, and you have to be a good steward of it.
Right. So backups, redundancy, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And how to recover quickly. And,
Okay.
Because it's really not a matter of if you're going to be hacked or it's when.
When
It's
and
really,
how well
it's going
prepared.
to be when.
Yep. And how prepared is
And
your
how
organization?
prepared and how you respond to it.
Yep. Fair enough. Gotcha. So let me go back a minute. You mentioned so students taking your classes, specifically cyber. If you could summarize maybe 3 takeaway traits an ideal student should or could have to be successful in that space, if they're considering it, or just basic character traits you might elaborate upon.
Yeah, I may be biased on this, but I think at least the first 2 is have a strong networking understanding. And when I say that, I mean even understand the protocols that are being used. Because on a network front, if you don't understand how IP works, IP addressing or TCP, then you don't know how to protect yourself. And so just understanding, having a really good, solid understanding of that. And if you go through our 3 Cisco classes that are the basis of our cyber program, you get a really good deep dive into that and understanding how to do that. And that'll help protect you there. And then I think just understanding systems in general. I know we have, there's Apple, there's Linux, there's Windows, and but really, I mean, even though I'm an expert on Linux, there's a lot of crossover on how that relates to Windows and Mac. There's a lot of commonality in those systems, right? And if you understand at the core how things work, then it helps you get by with things. So like, I don't own or use a Mac most of the time, but I have several students that do. And they get stuck on things, and somehow I'm able to help them, even though they probably have more experience with it. But I have more of that foundation understanding of how systems work on the very lower level of things, that I can then use that to troubleshoot and then come up with the results, in that
makes
way.
Sense, yeah.
A lot of time we just want to look at the top level of things, but you really, if you want to be proficient at good, you need to dive down deep and learn how to problem solve.
Right. Okay. So what I'm hearing
those
is
things: networking, systems, problem solving.
Right. Gotcha. And those are constant things I hear from professionals and faculty alike too. So
hopefully.
Hopefully. Yep. So I guess I'm creating my own leading questions for you. So, kind of what you just alluded to. From your vantage point, how important is balancing? So, well, let me back this up. I think a lot of students come to community colleges, and maybe they compare and contrast what they may or may not get in a 4-year institution. And I feel like we do a really good job with our students on the average of teaching the tactile or practical hands-on learning contrasting it with theoretical learning. What do you think is a good balance? Because the importance of understanding foundational skills in IT are super important, as you just alluded to. But like from your vantage point, what would be a good balance of an ideal program across any sector?
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good question. I think learning the conceptual stuff is important, but I think the way in which you learn the conceptual stuff has to be applied.
Okay.
And I think that's where community college in a 2-year, you get more bang for your buck in
Right.
that. Cost-wise, being done in 2 years and then working in a profession and then start working after 2 years.
Right.
Right? And so I think the conceptual stuff is important. And like I said, I've gone to a 4-year college. I have my bachelor's degree. I went and got my master's. A lot of concepts and theory and everything else. And I do think that that is important. But I'll even tell in my master's program, I never touched a server.
Right. Gotcha.
I took a database class, never touched a database. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the problem. I think that kind of the disconnect. And here, our students are doing those things. They're
Yep.
touching databases. They're touching servers. I mean, just within your first quarter or two, you're tearing apart computers. You're rebuilding them.
Yep.
You're installing
Right.
Linux and Windows from scratch. You know,
Yeah.
you're building a network in Cisco. You know, right from the get go.
Right. And I think it's good, you know, for our audience to hear and, you know, firsthand that, you know, you're going to get that tactile practical experience that you may not necessarily get at a 4-year institution. And no bash on those institutions, but you know, I think I
benefited from them.
Yeah,
you know?
because you need those. I think it's just a general assumption that everyone needs those, to your earlier point, foundational skills to progress to those next levels of proficiency. So glad you're kind of reiterating that. So gotcha. Okay. So a few more questions. So I think you kind of said this as far as like desired skills, but you know, that student that may come to you, Mr. Bernard, I'm looking at pursuing a career in cybersecurity or networking or maybe infrastructure support. What would you give them as far as things to consider outside of the skills you've already elaborated on? What are some other pieces of advice you might share with that candidate?
I think the biggest thing is they need to tinker. They need to play with the technology themselves.
Okay.
We do our best in the classroom to build a real world environment, but to be honest, we can't build every scenario that's going to be out there, right?
Right.
So I mean, for instance, in our IoT class, we talk about how it's used in manufacturing, how it's used in smart cities. You know, how a carbon monoxide gas leak happens in a manufacturing plant, and so you have a sensor that automatically recognizes that and turns on a fan and opens up a door, you know, and protects the people. You're right. We don't have the resources to build a manufacturing plant and to do that, and we have a simulated tool that allows you to do that, so you can interact and get a feel for it. But you can go home and build something like that. Right? You can test it out at home. And there's tons of guides, and we give you kind of the tools and the skeleton of it, and then or the framing of it, if you want, you know, house building type of thing. And then it's your job to kind of, you know, put the meat on it or furnish that house or whatever it is to top it off, to really get that experience. And there's really affordable, cheap or borrowed technology or technology you just have at home that you can use to do a lot of this stuff to play around with.
Right, and I think those are super, and I really hope our audience is listening to this, so what I'm summarizing is naturally inquisitive, someone that doesn't need to have their hand held to kind of further their knowledge and expertise in a certain area. Obviously, that's what we're here for, to help provide that foundational knowledge, but if you're not naturally inquisitive, it's probably going to be...
And it can be trained, you know, but it just means you have to work a little harder.
Right, gotcha.
I mean, I have a student, it's great. I just had a student in my third Cisco class, Cisco 3 class, and he's playing around with his networking at home, and when they come and go like, hey, I'm trying to do this, that's great. That to me shows that the student, they're understanding it, they're taking initiative and control of their own education and learning, and this student will probably be very successful.
Right, good to hear. So, again, related to all this, what do you use as for motivation, or how do you stay current to come up with those real world scenarios that are relevant to all aspects of our curriculum. So, you lead several courses in our various pathways. Give me some insight, or the audience some insight, as to what steps you take to bring in those real world scenarios into your classrooms.
Yeah, so on a daily basis, I keep up to date with articles and news. I think that's just, I have to do that. So if there's cyber attacks or changes in Linux kernel, all this geeky stuff, or IoT, I'm at least following what's out there in the world, at least what's communicated through media. That's my hobby is also my job, right? I love the stuff. If you watch my YouTube feeds, mostly it's technology stuff is what I'm watching. But beyond that is, we hear from, we have advisory boards where we hear feedback from people in industry and what they feel is more important. It's required of us to go out and to learn more industry stuff. I do that through conferences and through networking too. So I go to KernelCon and some other conferences where I'm able to network and interact with people who are working here in the metro area or on the grassroots levels doing this stuff and what they need for new hires. You know what I mean? And where the industry's going.
Right.
And then I take that and I adapt it to a lesson or a plan or a hands-on thing and that type of activity.
Gotcha. And I know, putting you on the spot here, so you just went to KernelCon, I know.
I did.
Can
it's
you
a
share?
Shirt.
Yep, I gotcha. Can you share with me and the audience what is one maybe takeaway that you learned new this year that you maybe could potentially include in some of your classes going forward?
Yeah. So let me explain KernelCon first, I guess.
Yeah, please.
So I think this is the 6th year it's offering it. So it is a hacking. Yeah, I don't know if they like InfoSec or cybersecurity, but they're more on the hacking side of cyber of it. And it's run by a local group that's here called DC 402 that have monthly meetings. And so it's an industry conference where they have speakers come in and they have professional hackers and CIOs and other people from industry come in and talk and everything else, and vendors, of course, who sell and work with these different organizations. And it's a fun conference. They do a capture the flag type of activities if you've been into some of these conferences. So you can do that. If you're not familiar with it, it's a hacking competition where you try and hack into systems and find things. They have something called a village where it's just a big room where you do a lot of different activities. So they have some locksmiths in there where you learn how to pick locks. And you just sit there and you practice and you can play with things. They have soldering activities there. You get a special badge each year that's usually some type of circuit board, and you can hack that.
Very cool.
So this year the badge was an Ethernet cable tester, a networking cable tester. That was part of your badge.
Right.
So you can literally take a network cable and plug it into your badge and test it.
Gotcha.
But you can hack it if you wanted to. Like you could change the LED lights on it and all this other kind of stuff. And so that's what you can do there. So going back to what you're asking about, something I learned there, I did take my 11-year-old daughter there. She's loves this stuff. And there was a company there. This is actually one of their shirts here. I don't know if I can promote them or anything like that. But anyway, they had this great demonstration here on something called vishing. So we've heard of phishing, where you get these emails, from a bank or something like that, and they're trying to get your user information and stuff like that. Well, this is vishing with a V, where you do it over voice, over the phone. So it's a social engineering type of attack, where you call up and you pretend to be technical support. You go like, hey, something's wrong with your account. I need your password to be able to fix it or something like that, right? And so they had this great demonstration there of doing this, where they programmed something in Python and using AI. So what you're doing now is you're calling this AI business. And first thing you come across is a receptionist of some kind, asking where to direct your call. And you just say, I forgot my password or something. Maybe. And they go, oh, so you probably need tech support. And they will transfer you to tech support. And tech support might be, hey, I forgot my password, and you sat, and they go, well, we need your, and you're having a real conversation, and you're hearing it in your ear. And even as you get transferred, the voice changes.
Gotcha.
All through AI.
Right.
Right? And then from there, they might say, well, we need an employee number. And I go, oh, I forgot my whatever it is.
Right.
And they go, well, I need to go to HR. So you go to HR, whatever it is, right? And it will just interact with you that way.
Gotcha. Very
Because that's a real world way it is.
Right.
And eventually there's a path, because it is kind of programmed a little bit. But, and it was just like talking to a real person, like if you go into a real company, and that is the way it worked. And so they shared that code with us.
Wow.
So I'm going to use that in my attacks and intrusions class.
Wow. Very cool.
And you can build different scenarios or different companies, right, with this AI
Right.
that students can practice.
Wow.
Because when we talked about the low-hanging fruit and the Sikh and the weak gazelle on the Serengeti or whatever, it's users.
Yep. Gotcha.
If you can just find the right person, and that's what this AI exercise did, was you just had to keep bouncing around until you found the person that was stressed out,
goes all the way through it, yeah.
or just they can't deal with it at the moment, and they just want to get you off their back.
Right.
And they may give you this key information, which you can then take to somebody else. And it's all in a safe environment, because it's just a closed AI. You're talking to a Python script and an AI engine in the back.
Right. Very cool.
And so that business was more than willing to share that. They open sourced it, and it was on GitHub, and they gave me their GitHub account. I downloaded it, I tried it at home, and so now it's my job as an instructor on how can I now build this into a classroom activity that maybe can be graded, that can be a learning experience, and adapt it in that type of way.
Very cool. Very cool. Very cool.
So yeah,
I like
so
that
that's something I'm going to implement.
Okay, sounds cool. So one more question for you.
Sure.
I know you lead the ethical hacking group.
Yep.
Maybe tell our audience, which includes students and others, a little bit about the scope of the group, some things you guys have done in the past, and what's on the horizon.
Sure. So so we've been doing it for about, I think, since 2019. So I guess 5 years. That's a long time. Didn't realize that.
Yep.
We normally meet about once a quarter,
Okay.
and we usually have presentations or speeches on topics of hacking.
Okay.
So our the last one, I guess I should talk about 2 ago, we talked about SQL injection, which I presented on. And that was, what SQL injection is, I'll kind of explain it, is if you ever go to a website form where you fill in information like your name, your address, phone number, something like that, those are all over the web. You can put special code in those fields. So instead of typing in Jared, my first name, you can type in something like semicolon, single quote, drop, all this code, whatever. And that will get you access to the database on the back end of that website.
Okay, very cool.
Which means you can either retrieve that information or you can delete it if it's not secured properly, or whatever else. So I demonstrated that in a safe environment, in a VM and a virtual machine, and told them this is what you can do to protect yourself or your business from this type of attack. But we've had special guests come in and talk. We've had, I think our last activity, we combined it with the esports club and did a movie night.
Gotcha. Right.
They watched The Matrix. So, yeah, but it really, we've changed format depending on the student leadership. So it is a student-run club.
Gotcha.
Students are supposed to lead it and help run it and make the decisions about it. And so in some iterations of it, we've met every 2 weeks.
Gotcha.
Because that's what the president wanted, and that's the way they kind of managed it. And some students were more busy and couldn't manage that, and so we just did one once a quarter.
Okay.
And so it changes a little bit of what it is, depending on the student leadership we have at the time, but that's mostly what it
ebbs
is.
and flows of the clubs. Yep.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, Jared, that's all I have for you today. Do you have any parting questions or comments for me or the audience that you want to share?
I don't think so. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks for having me.
Okay, well, thanks for having you. Thanks to our audience for tuning in again. Again, Cash In on IT is our new name. We hope to have you soon, and we'll have some new episodes coming in the coming weeks and months. Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Jared, again to you.
Thanks.
All right.